Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s. Obviously I'm in a different location, but the format's still the same. We're going back, this is episode number 63, we're going all the way back to November of 1995. I was 11 years old at the time and in 6th grade, so let's go.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Yeah, just a change of scenery here, I guess. I'm in the... Hope you guys can see me with the light off if it's too dark and everything, or if the stuff in the background is too distracting. I just thought it was kind of cool, so I have some flashing lights and stuff. Well, not flashing lights. Hopefully I don't give anybody a seizure. It's not flashing. But my normal one I do it in, I call the KFC studios. This one I call the Skyline studios. This is where I normally record my music and do my live stream that I do. I started last week, and it's every week on Tuesday. By the time this comes out, there already been a second one. I say every Tuesday. I don't know if exactly I'm going to do it every Tuesday. And I don't really have a format. I just kind of, ramble on and just talk about anything. Had a lot of fun with it last week. The people on there teasing me. I don't care. It's all fun to me. I was doing it on YouTube and Facebook, but nobody joined me on the YouTube. So I think I'm just going to do the Facebook Live, and then I'll upload that to the YouTube. And if, for anybody that can't read the comments, because I hate the Facebook Live where they have the comments, and you have to watch the video to see the comments instead of just reading the comments through, which is, crap. But anyway, I normally read the people's comments out loud, so that way anybody knows what I'm talking about and knows who I'm addressing anyway. But it's a fun little thing I do on Facebook. Join me on Facebook if you don't have me on there already. But anyway, this is the podcast, and like I said, hopefully it's not too dark in here for you and everything, and if you don't like the change, let me know and I'll go back. I can always turn the lights off and then turn the actual light on. No, and you actually need to see me to really understand. But if all that in the background's too annoying, got a frog in my throat this week. Anyway, before we get going, I want to talk about the bonus episode. I got some changes. Just put out the new bonus episode. As I'm recording this, it was yesterday, but by the time this is out, it'll be 2 days ago. All about wrestling magazines. Like a 36-minute short little, I didn't know how long it was going to be. If I could get these at 30 minutes, I would, but you see, I ramble on too freaking much. But, the next bonus episode is supposed to be all about my brothers and having them all do video or audio, call, interview things. But, because of schedules and everything, I kind of pushed that back. And I'm going to end up having that later on. I don't know the exact date. But the episode I was going to do for March, I'm going to do in February. And it's actually going to come out February 21st. It's a Saturday. And it's me ranking the top, just all of the Garth Brooks studio albums. As you know, if you know me, I'm a huge Garth Brooks nut. And I'll be talking about his 6th studio album coming up a little later on. But, just the studio albums, not the greatest hits and all the box sets and stuff. But just the studio albums from his latest one in 89, or his first one in 89, the self-titled one, to his latest one, I believe was it last year? I think it was the year before. So I guess that'd be 2024 maybe. It's called Time Traveler. It came out in a box set, but it was a studio album itself. But anyway, I'm a huge fan of Garth Brooks, so I'm just going to rank the albums. If you're a fan of Garth Brooks, you'll probably like that episode. If you don't like Garth Brooks or country music, you'll probably skip that one, but it's okay. That's what bonus episodes are for, just for me to talk about stuff that's not just in the 90s, although Garth was a huge part of the 90s. But anyway, I'm going to start off this week talking about some kids' meal toys. Of course, Happy Meal is the most known. McDonald's had Animaniacs toys, and they had 8 different figures based on the Animaniacs. I said that weird. Animaniacs characters, including Pinky and the Brain. But this is one of the Happy Meal toys I remember the most. because we had this one. It had the Warner Brothers and the Sister Dot hanging out of the Warner Brothers tower on like this rocket where they're trying to get out, but it's like a spring, so it's got like this. And for some reason, like, I guess I was watching Family Matters when I was playing with this toy at the time, but you know how Urkel would just come over and go, "Heidi ho, Winslow," which, by the way, I talk to my dog Carlos now. I go, "Heidi ho, Carlos." Anyway, but anyway, I would just take that toy all day. "Heidi ho, Winslow," over and over again. It would make my brothers laugh, so of course I kept doing it because, you know, me, an amateur comedian, if I get a laugh out of something, I run it into the ground, ask my wife. But I remember distinctly. Anybody ever remember the station wagons? Of course, I think they're most famous in the 80s, but I mean, they were all throughout the decades. My mom had one in the 90s at this time. And it was like a blue station wagon, but the coolest part to me was the back seat. Like, there was a second back seat, but there was also a third back seat that you could put up. You know, station wagons had a lot of room, you know, especially when the seat was down. But you could put that third seat up, and it wasn't just like normal third seats, like, you know, you see in vans and stuff, facing forward. These seats faced outward back, which we thought was the coolest thing in the world as kids. And there was only two seats back there, so it was always, you know, especially, you know, it was all because it was me, Josh, and Travis, and then Clint was a baby, so of course he wouldn't sit back there. But, you know, me and Josh and Travis, we'd have to take turns and always be fighting over who got to sit back there. But I remember it was usually me and Josh, and I would just, "Heidi ho, Winslow," and finally it just got so annoying. My mom took the toy away, and I think she hid it. I don't think I ever see that toy again. But yeah, that was a cool memory that I remembered about the station wagon, the rear-facing seat. Of course, making faces at everybody out the back windows, and there'd be parents like of other kids in there, and like just anybody, and sometimes we get flipped off for what we did. And one time we flipped them off back, either me or Josh or both of us, and they started beeping the horn like crazy, and my mom was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And they pulled up to the side, they're like, "Your kids are flipping me off." Oh, we got our mouths washed out with soap for that one. It's like, they started it. It's like, you know better. But anyway, moving on with the toys. Burger King had the Toy Story figures based on the movie. They had 6 figures. And, of course, that movie would come out this month. I'll talk about it in a little bit. But, of course, Toy Story, you know, Pixar and Disney started a whole franchise. But I said I'll get into that a little bit later. Wendy's had Mega Wheels toys. These were like the bigger plastic vehicles. You know, of course, you had like the Hot Wheels and stuff, but these were like the bigger ones. Almost reminds me of, if you guys remember, of course you remember Legos, but do you remember the bigger, you know, huge plastic ones that were just like randomly named like Mega building blocks or something? You know, they're, you know, not the small ones, but, you know, like big ones, and you could like build bigger stuff with them. Those vehicles kind of reminded me of that. You know, they seem more geared towards littler children that played with stuff like that, but still a really fun toy. Taco Bell had Nacho and Dog toys. Now, I don't remember Nacho and Dog too much as being their mascot. You know, just because the Taco Bell Chihuahua would come out a couple years later and like be like not just huge in like Taco Bell mascot, you know, commercials and stuff, but like in pop culture. Yo quiero Taco Bell, everybody knows that. And the one in the ad with Godzilla, with the Godzilla movie, when they're doing a tie-in for the, you know, the movie, they're like, "I think I need a bigger box," when they're trying to capture Godzilla. But yeah, I don't remember Nacho and Dog too much, but they were the Taco Bell mascots. And they were actually created by the same animated studio that did the Rugrats. Well, they had toys based on those figures from that, you know, those mascots. You know, but it's funny I don't remember that, but I probably knew it at the time. It's just that Taco Bell dog was like, yeah, that was the time of that. And then the Budweiser commercial with the frogs and the "I love you, man, you're not getting my Budweiser." You know, there was like some of that marketing was like genius. It's stuff that people heard and used in pop culture, like the "What's up?" and the Budweiser Super Bowl commercial. The Dudley Boys in wrestling started using that during a double team move. Like, the advertising stuff just like today, I guess today's equivalent would be like the Liberty, Liberty, that annoying freaking thing. Which I like the baby version of that. Peabody. Anyway, back to this. As you see, I can't keep this thing at 30 minutes. And again, this thing ends up being crappy looking because of the lighting. I'm sorry. And if you just want to listen to the audio version, it's available on Spotify. But, or just, hopefully it's not, like, annoying people to death, or I'm not going super blurry. But anyway, back to this. Hardee's had Apollo 13 Pogs. Of course, Pogs, one of my favorite things of all time. Also known as milk caps. They're just like these round cardboard discs. And they had the metal ones, which are the slammers. And it was a game, but people mostly didn't play the game. They were just like trading them more than I remember playing the game. But anyway, the Apollo 13 movie had come out. And these were Pogs based on that. And speaking of that, Arby's had Caps, which was like the off-brand of Pogs, but it was basically the same thing. A lot of people had Caps and Pogs, but they were all the same thing. But anyway, theirs were Yogi Bear and Friends, based on the Yogi Bear cartoon. Like, it shows how big it was. Like, two fast food restaurants were giving out basically the same thing, just different brands of it. Like, Pogs in the mid-90s, Caps, whatever you want to call them, was huge. And then Subway had Space Puzzles. It was a set of like 12-piece, like the little small puzzles based on like space shuttles and other things in space. So a pretty cool thing. I don't think I've talked about Subway's kids meal toys before. As you see, I've added some over the time. It originally started out McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's. And then, of course, I'd add KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut. And, of course, when I can find the information on them. That's why sometimes I don't have information on some. And then I added Hardee's and Arby's, and now I've added Subway. So, the more I find, the more I add. Anyway, talk about books. Goosebumps came out with book number 37, The Headless Ghost. I remember this one. It was also on the TV show. It was, I believe, the second season, episode number 5. But it's about these kids that are, of course, they moved to this town. That's always a theme in Goosebumps, it seems. I don't know if R.L. Stine moved around a lot as a kid or something, but it always seems to be a theme in his books. But there's this haunted house, and there's the legend of like this headless 13-year-old ghost in there, and they have to go in there, and of course there's the classic Goosebump twist ending to it. But they also came out with the Give Yourself Goosebump books, which I talked about before, is like Choose Your Own Adventure, which was a huge book series for me. They came out with number 2 in this month, and I'd actually just read this maybe a month ago. It's called TikTok You're Dead, which for one, with a kid's book saying the title Dead in it, was always like sort of controversial to the parents, because coming off the heels of trying to get scary stories in the dark completely shut down. But I've read pretty much, like I said, Choose Your Own Adventure, so you get multiple endings. You got to choose which page to go to. I think I've read all the endings to that. With the Goosebumps ones and with the Choose Your Own Adventure, very few like satisfying, wraps up the story ending. It's mostly you die or you get stuck somewhere. This one's about going, you're a kid and you're at this like museum with your parents, and it's like boring, but your brother sneaks off and like goes into this like time travel place and gets this little device and goes back into the past, and you got to go back and find him and bring him back to the present, and you got to decide whether he's gone into the past or the future first, and then depending on your choices, you go from there. A really fun book. If you haven't read those, read them. Same with Choose Your Own Adventure. If you've never read those are really cool things. Talk a little bit about music now. Of course, we talk about the Billboard charts, the Hot 100. Mariah Carey. I was going to say Mariah Carey. Who the heck is that? Mariah Carey's song Fantasy, which I don't think I've ever heard, because if you don't know by now, if you haven't watched this before, I am not a pop music fan, at least until the late 90s. Country music's always been my thing, but especially this time is the only thing I listen to. So I've never heard the song Fantasy. I've never talked either. Fantasy by Mariah Carey. But it spent 3 weeks at number 1, plus all of October, and 1 week of September, for 8 weeks total. And then the final song of the month that was number 1, it was only number 1 for 1 week, was Exhale, Shoop Shoop, whatever the freak that song is, by Whitney Houston. Never heard that song in my life either. But American Country Countdown, there was a couple songs that were number 1, which were like some of the biggest songs from the 90s and country history. David Lee Murphy's Dust on the Bottle which wasn't his first song. His first song, I think, was Party Crowd, which was a great song. But became his signature song. It's a metaphor for, like, you know, they're talking about a literal bottle. Like, this guy's over there, he's got a date, and he wants to go get a bottle of wine from this old guy he knows. So he, you know, the guy invites him down to his cellar. He's like, don't worry, there's a little dust on the bottle, but it's some things get better with time. You know, because, you know, the whole thing about wine, you know, the older it is, the more expensive it is. But it's saying that with, like, and then he equates that to, like, a relationship. You know, there might be dust on the bottle, as in, like, you know, the relationship's been going on for a while, but, you know, it gets better with time. A great song. It's his most well-known song. And then I can't say this about George Strait because he has 60 million freaking well-known songs, but one of his biggest of the 90s was Check Yes or No. That song was everywhere. I think even non-country fans have heard that song. Classic story about, you know, it's him, and, you know, he falls in love with this girl in first grade, and, you know, she sent him a note saying, do you love me? Check yes or no. You know, the elementary school type of thing, you know, and then years and years later, you know, they're not only together, but they're married, and he goes out and takes her out in a limousine. But the video is really good. I love the video. It's so sweet. And you know, it's got George Strait playing the song, and then actor playing the roles in the song. And all the time later, after, you know, he takes her out to see the George Strait show, of course, so George Strait can play the song live on there. But, you know, he brings out the note that he'd kept since first grade, and finally, I guess he hadn't checked yet. He checked yes. Such a sweet song. But anyway, the Dust on the Bottle was number one for 1 week in October, plus 1 week in November, where we're talking about, for 2 weeks total. And Check Yes or No was number one for 3 weeks, plus a week in December, so 4 weeks total, which was big on the country charts. Multi-week hits on the country charts meant the song was, like, huge. And pop songs, like, there's little songs I've never heard of that have spent, like, 16 weeks at number one, I swear. I've covered them on here before. But an album that was released, and I referred to earlier this month, was Garth Brooks' Fresh Horses. And I'll get into, like, the stats of the album, and I'll give some personal memories with it. But it was his sixth studio album, and it had come out right after he released The Hits, you know, which was the greatest hits from his first 5. And it was at number 2 on the Billboard Top 200, which is all albums charts, and number 1, of course, country charts. Certified 8 times platinum. It was his first album he had that wasn't certified diamond, which means 10 million or more. But I mean, he only sold 8 million. What a failure. You know, of course it was, you know, if you look in the time pocket, the Garth Brooks' era of super stardom, as far as, like, you know, pop culture everywhere all the time, probably was around, you know, ending at this time. Not that he wasn't huge and, you know, still in pop culture, but that was, like, from that, you know, basically 1990, when the Thunder Rolls and Friends in Low Places, you know, of course he had the album before that, which made him a star, but the superstar from 1990, you know, to 1995. But he was still putting out great music. You know, his first single came out was She's Every Woman. Great song. It went to number 1. The Fever, which was originally an Aerosmith song, basically about, like, doing drugs and stuff. He actually equated that to the rodeo lifestyle, and actually, you know, rewrote. I don't know if he did. I can't remember who wrote it or rewrote it. It might have been him and some other writers, but, you know, it was reworked into a song about the rodeo, and, you know, because the fever is like, you know, you got to do this. You're hooked on this. They basically took it from talking about drugs to the rodeo, and it worked. It was a really fast-paced song. Only went to number 29, though. I thought it would have been a higher song, because I remember it being on all the time. But then we've got... Sorry, getting used to looking over at my laptop over here, because obviously I'm not at my desk with my other computer. Then we have The Beaches of Cheyenne, one of my favorite songs of all time of Garth Brooks. The steel guitar on that is amazing. Just why I love 90s music, which is why my... Not a cheap plug, I guess, but my Back on 90s Country album will be coming out this month, or this month, I wish. I'm still only got 3 songs written for it. My last one's called 6 Feet. Oh my God, I can't remember. 6 Feet Gone. I was trying to, like, I can't remember. I got so many words in my head. That my latest song for it. It'll be released sometime this year, and it's just songs that's. I'm trying to make songs that sound like they're from the 90s, which is obviously that's self-explanatory. Anyway, back to this. Sorry for the cheap plug there, but The Beaches of Cheyenne, one of his greatest songs about. It's like a rodeo ghost story, which originally was going to start as like rodeo cowboys on the beach. It was supposed to be like a funny song, and during a writing session with Garth and I can't remember who he wrote it with, it just kind of morphed into this thing about a ghost, and it turns into a sad song basically. Number 1 for that. The Change only went to number 19, but it's that and Beaches of Cheyenne are my favorite songs from this album. This is the one about talking about trying to change the world, and no matter what goes on in the world, I'm not going to let it change me. Very powerful song. He did a video with this with footage from the Oklahoma City bombing, which of course was fresh in everybody's mind. I think I talked about that a couple episodes on here at length. But and I think proceeds from album sales and stuff, I believe he donated to that, because being from Oklahoma, that definitely hit him even harder than, it hit everybody in the country, a national tragedy. But I can't imagine people from Oklahoma, it's horrible thing that happened. It's Midnight Cinderella went to number 5. That's one of them songs I don't think I've ever heard him perform live, because I got a whole bunch of his live stuff from concert specials and the live albums. I don't think I've ever heard him do that song live. I remember it being a funny song and on all the time. And then his the last song released from the album as a single was That Old Wind, number 4. Kind of a love song about two people that a singer, and he meets a girl, and then they move away, and she ends up pregnant from it, and he ends up coming back. Really good story. My favorite album track that wasn't a single is probably Cowboys and Angels. Classic Garth Brooks Cowboys song is really good. And then, of course, he released this in the limited series, his first box set with his first 6 albums, where he added a new song to each one. Well, the song to this wasn't a new song per se. It was another number 1. It was To Make You Feel My Love, of course, written by Bob Dylan. And it was in the movie Hope Floats, on the Hope Floats soundtrack, but he hadn't actually released it himself. Well, he included it on this version, so not technically part of the original release, but still, I have both versions. So, just a great album there. And then earlier I was talking about Toy Story. And that was the big movie that was released this month. It was the very first movie that was all computer generated to be released in theaters. Of course, by Pixar, who was working with Disney, I believe, at the time, and I think Disney eventually bought them out. But it started a whole franchise of Disney Pixar movies and other movie series or studios that would do those type of things. Toy Story was a great movie. I remember seeing it in theaters. Just a great story, and of course it made you wonder, do our toys really come to life like that when we're not home? You think that, but you don't ever turn to your friends and be like, did that really happen? But just a great story there. So much, of course, the known toys like the Mr. Potato Head and Slinky in it, the Slinky dog. But then, of course, the toys that they made up for it, of course, Woody was based on the old, pull string cowboy toys that they used to have. And then Buzz Lightyear, the spaceman was kind of based on, futuristic toys that they had in the 90s. But really, out of the Toy Story, they spawned actual, I remember Buzz Lightyear toys everywhere. Everybody wanted a Buzz Lightyear toy because it didn't exist before this movie. So it literally made its own market as far as collectible action figures and everything. Just a great story, and of course, I think they're working on Toy Story 5 now. The only one I haven't seen Toy Story 2 for some reason, but I've seen 3 and 4. Don't ask me why I've never gone back to watch it, but or how I could watch the other ones and not that one. It's just whatever happened. But anyway, for me, Toy Story 1 is the ultimate. One of the best movies Disney ever did, especially. during the 90s, but I mean, that one's hard to even come up with because Hercules is my favorite Disney movie of all time. But you've got all these hits. You've got The Lion King and Aladdin out in the 90s. And then, of course, not too far before that, you had Little Mermaid. It's just, like, I think, unless The Little Mermaid was also in the 90s, I can't remember. But I mean, Disney in the 90s was on fire. Talk about sports now. Of course, being November, we're in, the football season. We're in it now. They were on week 14 of the season. And the leaders for each conference, for the AFC, were the Bills, the Steelers, and the Chiefs. And for the NFC, it was the Cowboys, Packers, and 49ers. And, of course, me being a Bengals fan, sad times. But we were 5-8 at the time, second in the Central. Of course, we'd missed the playoffs. And speaking of the playoffs, the Cowboys would beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl, later that year. Well, I should say next year, but it's technically that season. The Super Bowl is always in the year following whatever season. So the 96 Super Bowl was for the 95 season. It's kind of strange. Not as strange as basketball, where half the season's in one year and the other half's in the other. Baseball is the best because you go from April to the end of October, basically. It's all in one year. You're not confused. But this was also the year where the Jaguars and the Panthers joined the league. The Panthers were in the NFC, joined the NFC. Jaguars joined the AFC. The AFC Central, which was the Bengals were at the time. Of course, now there's 4 divisions now of 4 teams. But back then, most divisions had 5. Well, ours only had 4, so the Jaguars completed it, of course, until they realigned everything. But also, the Los Angeles, for over 20 years, lost their 2 football teams. Like, the same year they started, the LA Rams moved to St. Louis, and the LA Raiders went back to where they originally were from, or Oakland. Of course, now they've got more teams in LA. They got the Chargers and the Rams back again. But, constantly things moving around. And it was also announced during this month by Browns owner Art Modell that the Browns were moving to Baltimore. And eventually they would become the Baltimore Ravens because there was such an outcry from the fans that the NFL announced, like, okay, you can take the franchise there, but, and I think they probably worked out a deal. I don't think they legally had the rights because I think the owner of the Browns owned the name and everything. But, the Browns' history and their logo and everything is staying in Cleveland. And in a couple years, the Browns are going to come back. But you can go to Baltimore and you're going to start a new franchise, basically. But you take the players. That became the Baltimore Ravens, which definitely went on to become more better, I should say, during the time from when the Browns came back till now. Even they definitely been the better of the 2 teams. If they would have stayed in Cleveland, Cleveland might have had a Super Bowl by now. But and then Dan Marino was setting all kinds of records. He had set the record for he set 2 records this month actually. The all-time passing record, which most yards thrown by a quarterback during the regular season. He set it at 47,003. He would end up with 61,361, but of course, that record's been eclipsed many times. Tom Brady currently has the record, 89,214. And he also set the record for the most passing touchdowns in the regular season with 343. He ended up with 420, but of course, Tom Brady again, he now has the record for that, 649 touchdown passes in the season. And then some NASCAR news. There was the final NASCAR race. Dale Earnhardt won the final race of the year. It was the Napa 500 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And then, of course, the season over, determined by points, Jeff Gordon won his very first NASCAR championship that year, going on to become one of the best drivers of all time and my favorite. But I do want to talk, since it's Thanksgiving month, November, even though I'm recording this in January. And boy, it feels like January. But anyway, just like last week I was talking about December, Christmas at Granny's. We also went there for Thanksgiving. And of course, Marky Foe, our stepdad, repeated the same thing, eating 3 bowls of salad and unbuckling his pants at the table and embarrassing everybody. But of course, instead of ham, we would have turkey, and Granny just made the best turkey ever. Man, that thing was good. And of course, football. Everybody knows about football. Nowadays, you get 3 games a day. You get the Sunday night game. But back then, it was just the Lions get a game and the Cowboys get a game. And, ones that, like, round 1 or so. The other one's around 4 or so. And of course, that's always, you're either outside playing or you're watching that. And sometimes you'd watch the game and it get you so hyped up you go outside and play football. But man, we would play football over the years in so many different ways. I told the story about playing with the football with the Nike shoe, and then we'd had a duct tape made football. A lot of times as I get older, like, late teens, even early 20s, I would play with my brothers in the neighborhood after we moved back to Norwood. I know this is kind of in the future of this podcast, but we would play in the street, and we'd have like this, we'd have football. We'd have like everything mapped out. And I'm only telling this story because of how stupid I sound in it. But we would do the, everybody would run towards the same way, basically, unless you intercepted. So it would be downhill, because it was, this is like, we're playing in the street, and it's like a downhill slope, so it's kind of unfair to make one team go up. So one team would always start with the ball going down, like I said, unless there's an interception, and there'd be this car, if you pass it, you get the touchdown. But anyway, I got wide open on this day. And by the way, during this time, I swear for like a year straight, my ankle was like twisted almost every day I played. I would, even if I'd sit out and let it heal. And they'd all call me a baby, like, oh, you're a baby, get out here and play, if there wouldn't be enough players. And we'd do the same thing to Clint. We'd like force him, you better play. And he didn't want to play football at the time. He was younger. He was like, you got to play, we don't have enough people. But anyway, yeah, I would get called all kinds of names by my brothers and the neighbors. I literally couldn't walk. I literally showed them my ankle was swollen up. They're like, you're a baby. But anyway, this one play, I got so open. Like, of course, I wasn't as big as I am now, but I still wasn't small either. So, me to get open from all these skinny kids, basically, was something. So I was like, and it was like you're going to be the game-winning touchdown. So I run into what we call the end zone, which is the driveway of like half of it was the apartment, because we lived in these townhouses. There was 3 of them, if that's the right word for it, apartments, whatever. But there was one on the bottom, one on the top, with like 3 bedrooms in each. But half the driveway was that. The other half was the neighbor's driveway. But it was just, it was the line for the touchdown. I got so open, and my brother, I think it was Josh, was on my team at the time, because we always had random teams and stuff. I was like super open, and it was like game winning, like I said. And I get out there, and like I guess he's not seeing me or something. I just screamed at the top of my lungs, like, feed me! And everybody stops what they're doing, dying of laughter. Some of them are literally falling on the ground. Josh is laughing. He drops the ball. I don't even remember what happened with the game. But just the fact that I'm out there as big as I am screaming, feed me! I was like into it. I wanted to win this game. Oh, so stupid. But anyway, there was also times where we would play when it would snow. We would get out there, because that would be the only time we played tackle, because, I don't think we were allowed normally to play tackle football anyway. And plus, it was always easier just to play the street football with tag. People didn't get killed. But in the snow, it's like fun, because the yards had like sidewalks in the middle. So it was kind of hard to be playing tackle football when you're, part of it's driveway, part of it's sidewalk, then another sidewalk, then another driveway. So whenever it snowed, we had so much fun playing in the tackle football in the snow. It was like, none of us ever got hurt. Of course, we couldn't feel any of our body parts when we were done. And, we figure, oh, it's snow, it's fine. Once we get in for a minute or two and it starts melting, we're soaked. But couldn't have been more happier. For some reason, I always remember those games taking place at night. But yeah, just some fun memories there. Marky Foe, of course, Marky Foe would always watch It's a Wonderful Life Thanksgiving night, because I don't know if they still do it. They used to put that on Thanksgiving nights. Probably why I ended up not liking the movie, just because he watched all the time. And of course, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I remember when we were kids, this thing was like appointment watching TV. We get up and watch this at 9 in the morning to see all the floats. I don't know if it's just nostalgia talking, but it always seemed like when they were singing the songs, it seemed like they're actually singing songs. Nowadays, it's obviously recorded stuff. As kids, we didn't care about the marching bands. Like, come on, get on with that. We wanted to see our favorite floats and, favorite characters as floats, and of course Santa Claus being the big thing at the end. It's just, as I became an older teenager and as an adult, it didn't appeal to me. I don't know if it still appeals to kids like it did back in my day, or if it's really gone downhill. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade if you watch it, if you did watch it, what you think about it then versus now. But anyway, yeah, that's just some great Thanksgiving memories. All right, now I want to talk about some TV. A show that debuted at the time was Little Bear. And, I think I mentioned, I think I was I have to go back up and look. Yeah, I was 11 years old at the time. So Little Bear and Nick Jr. was kind of, getting to be too young for me, although I still enjoyed it. Like, for some kids my age, Nick Jr. is too far in the, for little kids, I'm not watching that anymore. But to me, I actually did enjoy still some of the Nick Jr. stuff, especially Blue's Clues still. But Little Bear debuted at this time on Nickelodeon, like I said, on Nick Jr. And it went 5 seasons for 65 episodes. And it was also later would also become part of the Saturday morning cartoon lineup on CBS. And then, of course, Little Bear was a half-hour show, 22 minutes with commercials, obviously. But it was actually, some cartoons, especially in those days, like Rugrats and Nicktoons, are famous for being like 2 segments each. Well, Little Bear had 3 segments each. Presumably, I guess, to make the story shorter for littler kids to follow along better. Because shorter attention spans than older kids. Although some of those older kids didn't have much attention spans. It was created by Maurice Sendak, which, of course, is probably most famous for Where the Wild Things Are. And until today, Maurice Sendak, to me, was a woman. For some reason, I always, I know now the name Maurice is like a man's name normally. But for some reason, I thought it was a woman that wrote the books the whole time. And, I was looking up information to see if there's anything besides Where the Wild Things Are that I knew from him, or what I thought was her. And it was a picture of, I was like, wait a minute. All this time, I thought a woman wrote this. Not that it makes a difference. It's just you think you know something for 30-something years, and then all of a sudden, you're completely off on it. It's but it's not like, if they did have his picture in one of the books, I never seen it. But I've read some of the Little Bear books, but Where the Wild Things Are was, didn't care for the movie. I thought it was weird as hell. But the book was always just something I remember. Something we had as a kid at Granny's. We had this stack of books, little golden books, all that. I'll probably talk more at length about that on another one. But that was always one of the ones that were there, and we would just read that over and over again. And then some shows that were ending. Sad times. Legends of the Hidden Temple was ending. They were on Nickelodeon, obviously, for 3 seasons. They ended up returning a few years ago here, on the CW, I think, and it was featured adults. It didn't interest me. It's supposed to be kids. It's supposed to be adults that were because it's their time period of being on there. But something about the show just didn't. I don't know if it was I don't know what it was. But anyway, they came out with a movie version based on the show, and I actually liked that. I think that was pretty good. And then Aladdin, the series, ended. They were on for 2 seasons for 86 episodes. Originally, they debuted on Disney, but then they moved over to the Saturday morning cartoons on CBS. Of course, this is before ABC was bought by Disney, so there was a lot of stuff actually Disney related on Saturday mornings on CBS until that acquisition of ABC. But the weird thing about Aladdin the series is it started 4 months before the sequel of Aladdin. Of course, you have Aladdin, and then you have Aladdin 2, The Return of Jafar. So, Jafar had been defeated at the end of the first one. Well, when the series came out 4 months before the second movie, the series is actually set after the movie. So, people were watching it going kids were like, I thought Jafar was dead and gone. Why is he in the series? Why is he back? Of course, and then the Return of Jafar was announced, but, just kind of scheduling everything there is kind of off. And then one that ended, technically ended, was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Of course, it didn't end. I think it's still going on, or if not, it's, recently just had episodes. But the original run of the show called the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers ended, and of course we've seen all kinds of changes. Starting off with the original Rangers, and then Tommy was the evil Green Ranger, and then became good. And then the original Zords being like taken down and defeated by Lord Zed, because he had Rita at first, and then Lord Zed takes over, the more powerful villain. So the Rangers got the Thunder Zords, and then. Of course, the movie happened, and you get the Ninja Zords, and and the show they kind of make that the Shogun, the Ninja Zords. The different explanation of how they got the Zords than the movie. Because obviously the movie they shot brand new. The series is using clips from the Japanese versions of the shows, so they're obviously different. So they come up with a different backstory of that, and of course you got. All the great Power Rangers, and of course the original Red Ranger, Yellow, and Black Ranger all move. So conveniently, three friends move to town that same time that the other ones move away, and they become Rangers. And then of course, Kimberly ends up leaving, and Catherine joins the show as the Pink Ranger. And then of course you got, like I said, Rita, and then Lord Zed, and then Rita puts a love potion on Lord Zed and marries him, so they're in power. And then Rita's dad, Master Vile, and her brother Ritor, or however Rito, I can't remember his name. Anyway, the bone guy, the skeleton guy comes, and it's just things are going nuts. And of course, Tommy by this time is the White Ranger. The Green Ranger power completely gone because it was created by evil, so it couldn't last. But this was, and then of course the last season things went crazy. They had the Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers in the middle. Master Vile used a time turner, would turn the kids into Rangers the Rangers into as they were as kids for a while. Which I don't, they should have still been able to morph. In Turbo they had the kid join the team, but it would all culminate then with the next season of this, which is not called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but it was Power Rangers Zeo. They found the Zeo crystal and got the all the Zeo Zords. And of course, they would continue. I would continue watching it. They would, like I said, they had Turbo, they had the movie, and then of course the series. I even watched when they went into space for the first season. But after the first season, it just kind of got to where this just feels like Star Trek, Star Wars, and I wasn't a fan of them. Although I did like Star Trek: The Next Generation, but not enough to keep me as an interest at the time. I was getting older, and just there too many changes. I stopped watching after that, but definitely love the original Power Rangers. But I was talking about music earlier, and it reminded me of the different stuff we, back during this time, it was radio was the big thing. Obviously, there was tape players and CD players, and we had all those. I forgot to talk about earlier about my personal experience with the Fresh Horses album. I actually got that for Christmas this year. It came, I guess Marky Fo and Mom went out and bought it for me. And I got the tape version, obviously, and a brand new stereo system. And, I remember getting that and the tape. I couldn't wait to go tell my friend Nick at school. He's my best friend, my only friend, basically. And he was a huge Garth Brooks fan, too. That's how we, became friends, basically. And, and then he came over for our New Year's Eve party, which I told a couple weeks ago about the homeless guy showing up and eating all the rotten fish. But that was that time when I got that stereo, and we would listen to that tape over and over and over again. But the radio always played a huge part in our lives. I remember having this pink and green. It was obviously a girl's radio, but I don't know where we got it from, but because it had paint on it, so we must have got it used. But I had that thing with me, of course, when Marky Fo wasn't home. I had it in the kitchen, listening to music while I was doing dishes. Had it in the basement while I was doing laundry. All these chores seem to be... When I say laundry, I don't talk about a normal kid's chores. Literally, they would have so much laundry and the washer and the dryer would be slow that I would sometimes be down there till 2 in the morning, having to go to school the next day to get his laundry done. Anyway, besides that, the radio was huge, but, there was a time when he got so mad that he literally took the radio and slammed it on the ground, and no, it's broke, throw it away. So, of course, naturally, I didn't. I plugged it in, and the speakers were dented, but it actually, and the tape player stopped working, but the radio still worked. You know that Aaron Tippin song, "There Ain't Nothing Wrong with the Radio" on his busted up car? Well, there ain't nothing wrong with the radio on the busted up boombox. But anyway, I secretly had it in the basement still, hidden. But I wanted to get it upstairs, and I had no laundry to take up to sneak it, and he was in the living room the whole time watching everything we did. So me and my brother Josh got this bright idea. There's a heater down, the furnace down here in the basement, and the heat goes all the way up to every room, right? And it's all through these vents. So obviously it has to go up to our room because there's heat that comes out. So our bright idea is to take the cover off the thing and to try to get this radio from the basement up to the main floor, all the way up to the second story floor. You can imagine this did not work. At some points it got stuck, sometimes for weeks, till we finally I guess just heat build up or unbuild up of not being on or something. We're finally able to work it loose and almost smash it again coming back down. Eventually we quit trying, but just some of the dumb stuff we did. But then when I finally was able to get it up there, I would listen to it at night. I'd have it super low and in my bed, under my blanket, to where I could just hear it, because he could hear everything. I talked about I think last week about me opening the pop, and I had to do it with my sleeve where you couldn't hear the pop opening. I was a master at that. Well, I had this radio, I'd listen to stuff, I'd listen to country music, but on commercials I would sometimes flip around just to see what was on. And I discovered on this one channel, this call-in show where it was between 1 and 3 in the morning. And they were saying explicit stuff because it was a call-in show where people were talking about their sex problems and how do you use this toy and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not supposed to be listening to this. This is so cool. So I would have this, I would sometimes fall asleep because, back then, today staying up till 3, it's I'm not even tired at 3 in the morning. Back then, it was a struggle to even stay up just to make sometimes I'd be mad I'd fall asleep before the show came on. And it wasn't on every day of the week. It was it would move around some. So I'd be trying to find it and, trying to find out what time it was on. But I had to listen to this thing. And I would tell Josh about this stuff. And for some reason, I remember as a kid, even before this, there would be a sex scene on TV or something, or, and we'd hear it from another room, and Josh's what is going on? And I knew what it was. For some reason, I wanted to keep my brother innocent, so I'd be I'll tell you about it when you're older. And it was always anything that had anything to do with that kind of stuff. Some brothers, they talk about all this stuff. For some reason, I was trying to protect him. I was I'll tell you about it when you're older. Just the weird, stupid stuff we did as a kid. That whole radio thing was insane. But I want to talk about some wrestling now. November 3, they had 3 big shows for wrestling. It was ECW had their November to Remember, which was the third, I believe the third one of that. Yeah, it was from the ECW arena, November 18th. And of course, at this time they weren't on pay-per-view yet. Stevie Richards with the brand new debuting Blue Meanie. Of course, this was obviously right before the BWO. Defeated, this has to be some made-up name to try to be funny, El Puerto Ricano. Obviously, that can't be that wrestler's real name. Unless it was. That was his actual name, or probably just some trainee they had at ECW threw a mask on. Could have been even Mikey Whipwreck, I don't know. I didn't watch the event, so I don't know for sure. Speaking of him, Mikey Whipwreck was actually the ECW heavyweight champion at the time. He retained the title, defeating Steve Austin. That was right. This was during that time when Steve Austin was in ECW after getting fired by Eric Bischoff by FedEx when he was injured, and before he went to the WWF and became the ringmaster, and then Stone Cold, and of course one of the greatest of all time. This was his one of his very few matches in ECW. Sabu made his return to ECW, defeating Hack Myers. Of course, I talked previously, the last time I was in 95, it was a couple weeks ago, I think, about how he no-showed the ECW event to go to Japan to wrestle for more money, and they, Paul Heyman blasted him at the crowd. And then he, of course, went to WCW for a very short time, but obviously by 95, the end of 95, he's back. And the main event was Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer defeating Raven and Cactus Jack. So definitely a big match there, and of course a continuance of the Raven Tommy Dreamer feud. And then WWF had their Survivor Series, their annual event where they do, they have regular matches, but they also have a lot of 4-on-4 elimination matches. They don't have them anymore. They're doing the War Games now, which I like War Games, but I wish they'd do at least one traditional Survivor Series elimination matches. If you don't know what that is, it's teams of 4. Sometimes they would have 5, and even they would have like teams of tag teams, so it'd be like 16 people. But that was like rare. But anyway, normally it's 4 people versus 4, and it's tag team rules, but elimination style. So after a pin, it's not over. That person's eliminated. But this was the 9th Survivor Series, and this is actually the day after the ECW November to Remember. This is from Landover, Maryland, and the first Survivor Series on Sunday night. Because originally it was a Thanksgiving, known as the Thanksgiving tradition. It was because it was either shown either Thanksgiving night or the day before Thanksgiving, depending on the year. This is actually the first one that was held on a Sunday. But on this event, WWF Women's Champion Alundra Blaze lost in a 4-on-4 women's match, and this was actually her last appearance for the company because she would show up next month. I guess she didn't have a contract back then. Vince was just doing handshake deals with people. This is definitely one of the times he learned not to trust people, because she ended up showing up on WCW Nitro, dropping the WWF Women's title in the garbage can. One of the most famous things that happened, and one of the beginning like blows that WCW would strike to before they started becoming number 1 for like 83 weeks in a row. But also on this night, Goldust defeated Bam Bam Bigelow, and that was actually Bigelow's last appearance for the WWF. Of course, we seen earlier in the year, the last time I talked about 95, he was main eventing WrestleMania with Lawrence Taylor. Now he's leaving the company, and he would go to ECW. And there was one of the big 4-on-4 Survivor Series matches was. And during this time especially, they would give teams like these names. Like sometimes they would be cheesy. Like the Undertaker's team was called the Dark Side. It was Undertaker, Savio Vega, Henry O. Godwin, and Fatu, which of course went on to become known as Rikishi, the Usos' dad. But it seems like a random team, but now that you know the Undertaker and who he was friends with, the team makes sense. But at the time you got, the Undertaker, he's the dead man. He's a babyface at the time. Savio Vega, which hadn't been there for a while, but he was, I can't remember if he was Puerto Rican or Dominican Republic where he was from. I think it was Puerto Rico. Or at least if he wasn't from there, he wrestled in Puerto Rico a lot. So you got him, they seem to have nothing in common. Then we got Henry O. Godwin, the farmer, the hog farmer, and Fatu, the Samoan. So you got a dead man, you got a guy from the Dominican Republic, you got a hog farmer, and you got a Samoan. like most random team. Anyway, they defeated the Royals, which was King Mabel, which Mabel won the King of the Ring. They were pushing him hard. Jerry the King Lawler, of course. His hired dentist with the bad teeth, Isaac Yankem, which of course is now mostly known as Kane. But he was Isaac Yankem during that short time, and Hunter Hearst Helmsley. They were the Royals. But the Undertaker's team won. All of them won. Like none of them were eliminated, and they last eliminated King Mabel by disqualification when he just, or not by count out when he just took off. So kind of a lame finish there, but none of the team members got defeated. And in the main event, Bret Hart defeated WWF champion Diesel in a no DQ match to win the title. And then WCW decided to have their World War III event, which was the very first one. It was November 26th from Norfolk, Virginia. And also on this night, another classic match, Sting beat Ric Flair by submission to the Scorpion Deathlock. I almost said drop. That would come later. This was pre-Crow NWO Sting. Of course, we know the NWO is coming next year. But in the main event, which was, if you don't know what the World War III match is, of course, you've heard of Battle Royals and the Royal Rumble. They would, but this was like Okay, WCW also did events where they had the Fall Brawl, which was the War Games, what WWE does now, where they have 2 rings with a cage. Well, this took it even further. There was 3 rings set up and 60 competitors. So all night there was the 3 rings there. They didn't just bring out rings while they're in an intermission or something. But 3 rings and 60 competitors. Obviously 20 start in each ring, and it gets down to it. It's just everybody all at once. Thank God, because can you imagine if everybody came out a minute and a half, 2 minutes, even a minute apart with 60 people, how long that would take? Anyway, Macho Man Randy Savage won, and he actually won the vacant WCW World Heavyweight title by winning the match. The title was vacant because of the way the Giant beat Hulk Hogan at Halloween Havoc, and of course that debacle, and then the way he won it, and the Yeti, as Tony Schiavone called him, the mummy that was the mummy out there humping, the mummy and Big Show, of course known as the Giant then, humping Hulk Hogan. It was basically what it was. Sorry, I'm looking to make sure I don't have a message. Since I'm back here, my wife don't know I'm back here. She's wondering where I'm at. But yeah, that was... and of course, Hogan being Hogan, always having to have the last word, he came out the next night protesting, I was never eliminated. I never got to be in the match, blah, blah, blah. Hogan doing Hogan things. But it was also during this time that wrong company, WCW Pro, which is a show that had been around since the 80s in different forms. They started doing their tapings at the Disney MGM Studios down in Florida, where they'd have their own studio there. That's when they started doing those tapings. And of course, those tapings are famous for people coming out with belts they don't even have in real time, just so that way they fit the stories because there were a bunch taped all at once. I don't know if it's the exact same studio, but I think it's the same place that TNA later on did their Impact tapings when they were in, the Impact Studios or whatever they called it, the Impact Zone in Florida. I believe it was the same park. I don't know if it was the exact same studio as WCW. But anyway, the WCW Pro at this time aired on Saturday mornings at 9:05 a.m. because everything on TBS was 05. I remember. I know it was a marketing strategy. I guess finish whatever you're watching on the other channel and come and watch. We're starting at 05, and then make you stay that extra 5 minutes after to finish it, missing what's on the other channel by 5 minutes, so you'd want to stay on their channel. The genius marketing ploy because it worked. But yeah, that was one of them shows that really got me into wrestling. WCW Pro and all their other syndicated shows, especially WCW Saturday Night. And Jim Cornette's Smoky Mountain Wrestling had shut down this month. They hadn't really been profitable, but they were, still able to do business. But due to 95 being known as one of the worst years in wrestling, financially and creatively in all companies, just across the board. Other than WCW Nitro debuting in September, 95 was, just a year. Well, Smoky Mountain Wrestling was feeling it too. That they couldn't operate anymore. So Jim Cornette, closed it down, and he went on to, focus more. He was already in the WWF, but to focus more on his, managing, plus, the behind the scenes on the creative team, really focus on that, and I have to, deal with his other company. And then there was another title change that happened. It was WCW. Kensuke Sasaki, if I'm saying that right. I'm bad with the Japanese names, I'm sorry. Defeated WCW US Champion Sting at WCW World in Japan. It was an event that they had in Japan. Now I'm almost done here, but I want to take a look at I almost said the WCW lineup, at a Nickelodeon lineup from a Friday. It was November 10th. So I want to look at that if I can find where my mouse is at. My mouse has disappeared on my computer. There we go. Yeah, we got the lineup pulled up here. Of course, we start at midnight, so we start with Nick at Night. We've got the Bob Newhart Show, the Lucy Show, one of my mom's favorites, Lucille Ball, Dragnet, the Munsters, one of my all-time favorite shows, any kind, whether you want to call it horror, comedy, whatever, one of my favorites. Definitely more comedy than a horror, really. It's just horror characters set in a all comedic background and setting. It's so hilarious. Just like with the Addams Family, I was always a fan more of the Munsters. I wish the Munsters and the Addams Family could have had a crossover. That would have been amazing. Or even like the Munsters and the Beverly Hillbillies or something. That would have blew my mind. Anyway, we had the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, Welcome Back, Kotter, Dick Van Dyke Show, Bob Newhart Show, The Lucy Show again, Dragnet, Launchbox, which I never really watched that. I think it was like a space show, but I never really watched it. Then we got Bullwinkle's Moose-O-Rama, which was Nickelodeon's version of, the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. Wienerville, my brother Josh, I always talk about it, my brother Josh's favorite, hosted by Mark Wiener. It was like a puppet show, a variety show. Gumby, that's a classic one, but one of my favorites of all time. And just like some of the other shows, my first experience seeing Gumby, I'm not from the 50s, was seeing it on Nickelodeon. Everybody else remembers it from other things. I remember first on Nickelodeon. And then we've got Beetlejuice, the animated series, obviously. And that I don't remember from Nickelodeon as much as I remember it from syndication. It's weird. It's like wherever you first see something, you always think of it being there. And then you do research and find out it was on multiple channels at multiple times. And then we got Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. Of course, you got to have those. Classic. We got Rugrats, one of the very first 3 original Nicktoons. The Busy World, and we're in Nick Jr. And of course, Rugrats would fit everywhere on Nickelodeon. It was on Snick, it was on afternoon, nighttime, and Nick Jr. It fit everything. It was perfect Nickelodeon show. The Busy World of Richard Scarry, which I loved, based on the books, and it was originally a Showtime series. Muppet Babies, one of my all-time favorites. It's another one that started, on CBS, I believe, but I only seen it on Nick Jr. The Muppet Show, as much as a fan I was of Muppet Babies, I did not like the Muppet Show. It just did not interest me. It seemed like the same type of humor as Saturday Night Live, and I couldn't stand that show either. Then we got Allegra's Window, one of the newer shows at the time. It's all about a puppet, experiencing life through her window. And then Gullah Gullah Island, learning all about the Gullah culture from an island off of South Carolina, which for the longest time I thought was like closer to like Jamaica and like part of anywhere else. I didn't realize it was like that close to South Carolina. I just, from the accents and the difference in culture, I could have swore it was a different country, even continent. But I only learned that recently. But I loved learning about the whole culture. And of course, Binya Binya Pollywog. Can't forget that. One of the funniest things about that show. And then Rupert, which I didn't watch a whole lot of Rupert. And The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth, I never watched that. It just seemed too cheesy, even as an 11-year-old. Then we got Eureka's Castle, one of the greatest Nickelodeon shows of all time, of course with the puppets, which I later learned was, like, one of the creators was R.L. Stine. That blew my mind. Like, it shouldn't have. They were so weird, but just, I always think R.L. Stine, Goosebumps, horror, that's all he's ever done. Obviously not. And we got Papa Beaver's Storytime, which I never really watched. Gumby again, The Adventures of Tintin, which was I think it was a French cartoon, was it French or was it Russian? I can't remember. I'm like confused there. I want to say it's French. But anyway, I'm going back and forth with it in my head. It was dubbed in English. It was about like a teenage reporter that like always solved these mysteries. I love that show, cartoon. Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon again, Beetlejuice again, then Muppet Babies again, and then we got Alvin and the Chipmunks. This version of Alvin and the Chipmunks I love. I didn't care for the movies or anything, but the theme song of this always in my head. And then we got Tiny Toon Adventures, of course, 90's in a nutshell right there. Legends of the Hidden Temple, of course, getting ready to be done for good. Of course, they would play it, in replays for a long time after this. And then Rugrats again, and then we've got Doug, one of the 3 original Nicktoons, Ren and Stimpy being the other one of those 3. Then we got 7:30. We've got Clarissa Explains It All, one of my favorite shows of all time. I keep seeing the meme now on Facebook every day. People like, Clarissa still hasn't explained everything, but I love that show. And then at 8 we go back to Nick at Night because kids are supposed to be in bed then. But being a fan of this show, I definitely stayed up to watch this. It was the Munsters. Well, depending on the time, because sometimes I didn't have cable in the house, depending on where we were living. At this time, we were living in Norwood, so it's a 50-50 shot whether we had cable or not. And then, of course, we got I Dream of Jeannie, I Love Lucy, Bewitched, one of my wife's favorites, Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, Welcome Back, Kotter, and then end with the Dick Van Dyke Show. And then, of course, we got to take a look at the TGIF lineup. Of course, their main show was Family Matters. They were in season 7 at the time. Boy Meets World was in season 3. Some great episodes this month. They have one where Sean's living with Mr. Turner, his English teacher. He ends up moving in after his mom runs off and his dad goes off in the trailer to try to find him because they took the trailer. But yeah, and it was during the time that Sean was living with Mr. Turner. Well, he somehow found a pig and was keeping it hidden as a pet. And, Topanga was against it, like, you can't keep him out of his natural environment. And called the animal control people. And it was there was tension there between them. And of course, Corey was in the middle, his best friend and his girlfriend. And then there was also the one where they're like accidentally film Janitor Bud like clocking out before he's supposed to, or like having somebody like clocked in out for him to make it, and they got him fired. And I can't remember, there was a reason he was like leaving early, and he ended up getting his job back, but they ended up learning a lesson about loyalty because, they were trying to get a news story. It was like hidden camera footage, and we're going to expose this, and they learned. Of course, Corey and Sean always learning a lesson. And then there was Step by Step. They were in season 5. And then Hanging with Mr. Cooper, which I need to watch more episodes. I haven't seen that since the 90s. Season 4. And then we're going to end here with just a little bit about video games. Just a brief bit. November 24th at something was called the Nintendo Space World Software Exhibit. It was in Japan. Nintendo unveiled their brand new system to come out, which was at the time called the Ultra 64. They had a playable version of it, and they had some demos, including Super Mario 64, which of course became one of the biggest games of all time. But yeah, of course, the Ultra 64 would be renamed the Nintendo 64. They got rid of the Ultra part. It just seemed like it was one of those words they put in the 90s, like Ultra, Mega, But anyway, yeah, that they were getting ready to come out with that, so they were debuting it there, showing off what it could do. A huge leap from Super Nintendo graphics to Nintendo 64 graphics. And it was also during this year, a couple months earlier, that they discontinued finally the original Nintendo NES. Stopped putting out games for it, stopped making controllers for it. Because Nintendo, you got 8-bit with the Nintendo, then you doubled it to 16 with the Super Nintendo. Then you double that to 64 with the Nintendo 64, and I believe the GameCube even doubled that to 128. And I don't know if they kept track of that after, it was all just high definition stuff. But yeah, a lot of good things to come for Nintendo with the Nintendo 64, one of my all-time favorite systems. Hey, maybe I'll do my favorite video game systems episode as a bonus episode. I think that'd be kind of cool. Go back and talk about it and some of my favorite games from it. So I've already done a video game one with my brother Josh, but like just to rank my favorite, I'll take 10 systems and rank them. I know there's been way more than 10 video game systems, but I'll just rank 10. But anyway, that's a fun one to do. But be on the lookout for my bonus episode coming in February. My top Garth Brooks albums, not top, just all of them ranked studio albums. Join me on my live stream. I'll announce on Facebook if I'm doing it that day or the day before. It'll be 9 p.m. usually. Start right at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Facebook. I hope you guys are enjoying the music I'm putting out and just all these videos. If you got any comments or suggestions, let me know. I have so much fun doing this. If the lighting sucks on this, let me know and I won't do it again. Or I'll have the light on. Again, that's what that looks like. But anyway, next time I'll be with you on the podcast. Might as well turn it off to finish it. We'll be speaking of Nintendo 64, episode number 64. We are going back, as I'm choking to death here, 4 years into the past, give or take a month or so, to September of 1991. And it'll be my 5th trip through 91. And at the time, I was 7 years old and just starting 2nd grade. I was living at Granny's at the time, right before we moved to the apartments in Mount Carmel. But yeah, next time will be September 1991. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.
Wrestling Wars.